Well, give us, in a nutshell, the opening argument for why it's the Constitution's fault.
Well, let's just start with the idea that it's supposed to be a democracy, which means rule of the people, and roughly the idea that everybody is equal, that everybody should have an equal say in forming and conducting the work of the government. And then let's talk about the United States Senate, because let's just be specific and concrete. There are 39 million people who live in California. There are 550,000 people who live in Wyoming. They both have the same number of senators. That is ridiculous. That is undemocratic and wrong, and it is we can explain why that happened. Everybody knows about the Connecticut Compromise, which is I was just reading about it as I was walking around the display cases, that in order to get a unanimous vote of the states at the Constitutional Convention just down the block, the big states had to give something up to the small states, and they came up with the Connecticut Compromise, where the big you had one house of the legislature that is based on proportional representation, and the other that is just two people a state. Now, that's why it happened, but that doesn't mean it was a good idea. And I think part of the dysfunction, and this is just one easy-to-cite example, is the undemocratic nature of the Senate.
Excellent. Okay, well put on the table. Now, I want to come back in a moment to the claim that everyone agrees the problem that the Constitution is not democratic enough, because many on the right say the problem is that it's too democratic and should be more constrained. But just on the Senate, let's dig into the details. You say the Senate has blocked the League of Nations and the healthcare reform, the Clinton healthcare reform. Wouldn't the argument on the other side be it stopped some of the crazy excesses of the House today? It prevented House Republicans from repealing Obamacare. It was responsible for the budget compromise. Whatever sanity there is in Washington is actually because of the Senate, not in spite of it?
Well, my argument, overstated and ridiculous as it is not that everything the Senate has ever done is wrong. It is really just, it is more of a structural argument that in a system where you want the government to work and be responsive to the will of the people, the idea of having an unrepresentative body like the Senate is wrong. Now, the larger idea behind the Senate is that you will have one deliberative body that takes its time, not as responsive to the immediate whims of the people, and the famous metaphor that George Washington supposedly said, although probably didn't, that it's the cooling saucer, that you pour tea into the saucer to cool for a while, and that the Senate was the cooling saucer, whereas the House was the impassioned, immediately responsive branch of government. You could have a system like that while still maintaining a more democratic idea. The classic difference between the two is the length of terms. You have the House, which is every 2 years. You have the Senate, which is every 6 years. You could have a body that was every 6 years, which would be by necessity somewhat more insulated, but still have a more democratic representation. So it is not that a bicameral legislature, in my view, is inherently undemocratic. It's just that this one happens to be.